So let's talk about the first thing, empowering ownership. We're going to bring up our first guest speaker, Jenny Larson from Salvage Vanguard, to talk about how necessary it is to empower ownership and the impact that her company has had and the impact of displacement on her company. Please welcome Jenny.
Hi. I'm Jenny Larson. I'm the artistic director of Salvage Vanguard Theater. Salvage Vanguard was founded in Austin in 1994. We have a 22-year history of producing experimental performance here in Austin and a 10-year history of running an arts hub on Manor Road. I found the company, stumbled upon the company, discovered it, other people knew of it. I found it in 2001. I saw a piece by the playwright Mac Wellman, who has later performed at the Fusebox Festival, called Terminal Hip. It was really weird, and I like weird. And actually, I think about how Matt was talking about risk and DIY arts, and that is Austin, and that was really attractive and sexy to me, so I decided to start working for them. I worked as an intern reading scripts, and then I was acting, and then I was doing arts administration, and then I was directing, and actually the very first show that I directed for Salvage Vanguard was in our Manor Road home before it was built out. It was just a big, open, empty warehouse. And it is surreal to me to think about 2006, and then to think about 2016, and I'm looking at air, and I'm like, I know you people know, you feel it, you feel me. It's crazy how much it's changed. And the thing that people are talking to me, asking me about the space over and over again, it's so bittersweet because we are on the brink of becoming what we have dreamed about being this whole time, a vibrant, inclusive, dynamic, diverse, accessible hub. We are busy 24/7, and as most of you know, we are losing our lease. We have to be out by midnight on June 30th, so we're about 2 months out. But I'll talk about that sad part again in a second, but let me talk to you about some really fun facts that you might not know about this great arts hub. Salvage Vanguard hosts over 30 productions, festivals, exhibits in a given year. That includes music, dance, visual art, film, comedy, puppetry, theater, all of the things. Some people that we're proud to have in our arms, visual artist Beth Kinsella-Rubel had an exhibit with us this past year. Choreographer Kathy Dunn-Hamrick does several of her shows with us every year. Trouble Puppet Theater, Black Poets Speak, Outsider Film Festival. We have such a broad and eclectic family that call our space home. And not only do they use it for performances, but we are a space that offers rehearsal rooms, meeting rooms, audition space. We have people who share our office with us, storage space. We really provide artists with what they need on all levels, and we try to keep it as affordable as possible. Did you know? 75% of the artists that we work with are women. That means that the individual artists are women, or that the companies we are creating relationships with are run by women. 45% of the artists and or companies we work with are run by artists of color. We're proud of these facts. There are at least 10 to 15 creatives employed on each production that happens at Salvage Vanguard. So if you do the math, that means over 300 contract jobs being created in a given year because of the work happening on Manor Road. Now, another numbers fact to prove our economic value to this community, each production material budget is anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. That means between $60,000 and $150,000 a year are being spent by the artists in the community to create these pieces of art. So, yeah, we're small, yeah, we're nonprofit, but there is value in what we do. And it is beyond just the artistic and the cultural value, there is actual economic worth in having venues like these and hubs like these in the city. And finally, we see over 30,000 patrons in our theater in a given year. Now, just imagine for a second, so I'm sure, have you had a drink at a bar on Manor Road? Or a restaurant? So you imagine 30,000 people going to drink before or after, dinner before or after, and I know they do because I see y'all. I see you in my gallery, and then I see you at the bar afterwards. So think about them spending $20 maybe, at minimum. That is $750,000 a year being generated for our neighbors on Manor Road. All of this is just proof in the pudding that a hybrid arts venue like Salvage Vanguard, that isn't just theater, it's not just music, it's everybody, and everybody actually feels like it's home. That was one of the most moving things about when we announced we were losing our lease, how many people were devastated that I didn't even knew we existed. That was great. And a lot of people that's great. I'm really sorry you guys are devastated. I'm really happy. No. But, I mean, that is proof in the pudding. This kind of venue is needed in our community. We're proud of it. And we're sad we're losing it. And, you know, the dream was always to buy. We invited our past landlord into conversations on selling us that property, but he didn't want to sell the property. There are two lots adjacent to each other, and he didn't want to sell them separately. He only wanted to sell them together, and that price point was too expensive for us. So new landlords buy it. We ask them, will you sell to us, please? Not even interested, because they know where they are. Manor Road is hot property right now. They know that they can knock that place down and make condos and make a ton of money in 5, 10 years. So they weren't interested to sell. So I asked, will you renew our lease? At first they said no. Then we did a press release that we were losing our venue, and actually a bunch of you guys wrote letters and sent angry letters and made angry phone calls. So thanks for that, because then they came back to us and said, okay, yeah, we'll entertain renewing your lease, but the renewal rate is 4 times what we are currently paying. 4 times. We can't afford that. How can we afford that? We can't afford it because that would mean making our artists pay more to use our facilities, and it would mean charging our audience members more to come and see shows. That is directly against our mission. We want to be affordable and accessible and inclusive. And we have been, and we're proud of that, and we want to keep doing that with wherever we land. So we still have this dream of this collective home, and myself and the Salvage Vanguard staff plan on continuing to work and push for this, towards this, because we know that this entire community is in need of a space like this, that our city is in need of a space like this. We've been looking, we dove headfirst into the property jungle in Austin, and it's been an exhausting 7 months of basically finding out that we don't have the money to buy property in the neighborhood we want to stay in. We just don't. And you know, that is not to say we don't have any money. Again, we have a sustainable model, and we even have investors interested in helping us. But property, I mean, y'all know, it is so expensive in this town. It is prohibitively expensive. But the other side of that, yes, it's prohibitively expensive, but we have to own. Because as John said, it's just going to get more and more and more expensive. So we can't keep band-aiding these situations with another lease here and a lease there. We have to own. If we don't own, we'll get elbowed out. The value of our organization and spaces like Salvage Vanguard is undeniable. We're on a precipice of change in this city. And the creative class will either be elbowed out completely or we get together. We unify. And we can't unify alone. We need the city. We need the municipality to be behind us on this. Because as small arts organizations, we can't afford to purchase without the city's help. I think that's all the ranting and rambling I have for you. Thanks.
The Austin Creative Trust idea is something that I was talking with Brad Spees, again, the former Music Commission chair, and he was working on some of this stuff for music venues, and I was we were doing like the same movie, like the Billy Bob Thornton versus Bruce Willis Asteroid movie, and we decided we should combine the productions, and Brad and I worked for several months to flesh this out, and we did research on other cities and how they use land trusts. You can read through some of that. I think the challenges are pretty obvious. The goals are to stabilize facilities and reduce costs, and expand employment opportunities. That's important. the strategies are to behave as a low-interest lender or a land trust and a nonprofit developer, things that we've seen other cities use land trusts for. Just for example, the Anchorage Community Land Trust goes out and incentivizes and figures out how to drive the kinds of businesses it wants. For instance, grocery stores and food deserts, banks to come to neighborhoods that only have access to check cashing places. And that's relevant because that's an example of a land trust driving preferred development. And if you just change that to creative infrastructure, we want a land trust that's going to drive creative space development. And it can be a low-interest lender in that, you know, for improvements, if an organization owns its space, but what they really need is like a kitchen or a bar to increase revenue, the land trust could loan them the money at zero interest, and it's nonprofit. So it can make long-term investments and not have to worry about a return to you know, owners. We've seen land trusts buy land at way over market value, but you know, in 10 years, what's way over market value now is going to be a bargain. So we would like to see this thing come together in a real way between the corporate community, the government, and our community to save spaces that we have now. And if we can capitalize this soon, it's a short-term solution to some of the groups that are faced with losing their spaces. It's also, for example, a place that would buy culturally relevant spaces. I keep thinking about the Broken Spoke. I don't think there's any nobody's saying that the Broken Spoke is going away. But if Mr. White passes away and his daughters don't want to run it, yeah, we should buy it as a community and then put out proposals or requests for proposals and see who wants to run that thing. Because I don't want to be in Austin without the Broken Spoke, honestly. So this is about empowering ownership. And then I have one more about developing new audiences. Now, these aren't the only ways to develop new audiences or empower ownership. These are the ones that we saw worked in other communities. And the big one is cultural tourism. Austin's doing great with tourism. We could do better. We see other cities really lapping us in development of cultural tourism. And as an industry, convention tourism is sort of flat or barely like this. Cultural tourism is where the growth is in that thing. And people come to cities more and more to get the authentic experience of that place. I'm from the New Orleans area. In fact, I'm going to be there this weekend. And New Orleans, post-Katrina, has done an amazing job of talking about their heritage and getting people to come. And they still have a huge convention component, but increasingly New Orleans tourism business is leaning, it's still mostly convention, but the culture draws them there. But lots of people now come to New Orleans just to experience the culture, not to see it, to do a convention and happen to experience the culture. And what was interesting about Red River was that it has a corollary in New Orleans, where we all know world-famous Bourbon Street, and we have our own version of that, Dirty Sixth. It's not quite as close, but if you go to the end of Bourbon Street where it hits Esplanade and crosses over into the second oldest neighborhood in New Orleans, the Faubourg Marigny, where I lived when I waited tables when I was 20 between semesters here at UT and had a really good time. But the Marigny, it has a street called Frenchman Street. And Frenchman Street has 8 to 10 clubs in close proximity, but mixed in is like restaurants and the praline shop and museums and art galleries, all kind of right there in the neighborhood, very close to the tourist center of that city. And it is killing it. As I mentioned, I am a band manager. One of my bands that I managed for a while called T-Bird and the Breaks, they broke up last year. A Frenchman Street gig was as valuable to them as an Austin home gig because people, tourists and visitors and locals in New Orleans have been trained to pay for live music, and they consider it a cultural experience. And it's really amazing. We looked at it. I'm heading to New Orleans to actually see an artist that I'm considering signing. And we talked about his income. He's a full-time musician in New Orleans. He makes more than any full-time musician in Austin that I know, and I know several. My wife was a full-time musician in Austin. So how can we drive more audiences to consume live music and at the same time show them what else Austin has to offer? The idea is that we have to develop our cultural tourism to drive new audiences and put more round-the-clock downtown activity, cultural activity for our residents as well.